Hello. Today is the 1st of May 2023, and we'll talk about an engaging subject for our time, architecture and plans. But the reason I chose to talk about this today is the following one. On this day, the 1st of May, 1753, this book was published in Sweden, and I will read a little bit about it. Species plantarum. I'm not sure I write well the species of plants, but in Latin, species plantarum, I guess. The species of plants is a book by Carl Linnaeus, a very important name in this field, originally published in 1753, which lists every species of plant known at the time, classified into genera. It is the first work to consistently apply binomial names and was the starting point for the name of plants. Species plantarum was published on May 1st, 1753, and this is the reason we talk about it today, by Laurentius Salvius in Stockholm. That was his name, or I'm not sure. This is maybe the name of the publisher. Sorry, the author is Carl Linnaeus, but I imagine Laurentius Salvius was but with a Latin name, in Stockholm in 2 volumes. A second edition was published in 1762, 1763, and a third edition in 1764, although this scarcely differed from the second. Further editions were published after Linnaeus' death in 1778 under the direction of, Karl Ludwig, the director of the Berlin Botanical Garden. And the 5th edition was published in 4 volumes in 1800s. What is interesting that until Linnaeus, the plants were not, apparently they were not named. I mean, they were named, but in this way. Like, for example, this plant was called like this. This plant was referred to as Plantago follis ovato lanceolatis pubescentibus spica cylindrica scapo tereti. And Linnaeus renamed it Plantago media. So until him, the plants didn't really have a name. It was, a rather complex text that describes several attributes of the plants. So with Linnaeus in the 18th century, we started to name plants. Now, in what way is this important? I think it is important because on one hand, we took control of nature. Well, we did this in several ways, but of the world of plants, by naming precisely each plant, we began to control those plants. And it is almost the sarcasm of fate that today, on the 1st of May, is also the International Day of the Workers, or of work. So through work, the human being began to control nature, and architecture, of course, has an important say in this process of emancipation of man from nature. But now there is a lot of interest in coming back to nature, in coming back to the world of plants, so much so that this book was published recently, Hortitecture. It was me who divided the word hortitecture in green and red, the power of architecture and plants. Now, this book would not have been conceivable, in the near past, and even less in the remote past. It is a phenomenon of today that we need plants, we need ozone, we need the world of the vegetable world. We need the world of the plants in order to survive. But architecture is trying its best to sabotage this in a way. And it's very, very hard to continue to work, to build, and at the same time to respect the world of nature and the world of plants. It's very difficult because through its very nature, architecture is against nature. Even Frank Lloyd Wright, with his advocating the marriage between architecture and nature, the truth of the matter is he rather provoked nature. I mean, the falling water, Frank Lloyd Wright placed the building just above the falling water. So the fire of man, and not accidentally for Frank Lloyd Wright, fire was always at the center of the house. So by placing the building, the house, literally above the falling water, he placed man above nature. That's what he did, literally. Although he claimed that, one should always study nature, that nature would never let you down and you can learn a lot from nature and so on. But the conflict between man and nature is as long as the history of man. And Frank Lloyd Wright was not an exception. He had appreciation for nature. He had, I think, even an understanding of nature. But he also had his human ego. And that ego sometimes, maybe often, maybe always, manifested itself very, very strongly. But today, horticulture or horticulture is important, very important for architecture. So much so that I even made a recommendation to the school here to start a department of horticulture within the School of Architecture. And such a department exists already in a School of Architecture like the one in Cincinnati in the United States. They do have a department of horticulture, and they had it for a long time. But this book, Hortitecture, The Power of Architecture and Plants, was published by this person. You see his name here, and you can purchase it. Even in our country, you can find it. It's about 180 lei. And this is the cover of the book. Hortitecture, The Power of Architecture and Plants. But you see, the plant is green, all right, but the title, the name of the book is written in red, and red stands for fire, not for plants, not for nature. So the eternal conflict between nature and man is still manifest. But I think an architecture that has a longing for some kind of a negotiation with nature is an architecture that perhaps defines our time. We can call it an eco-architecture, we can call it a sustainable architecture, we can call it a green architecture. We can also modify one letter in the word eco, that is the middle letter, C, which could very easily become a G, and then eco-texture becomes an ego-texture. So we have to be careful because architects usually are not very modest, and the very act of building is assertive, is to say the least, is concerned with man. In a way, Alvar Aalto was correct. Architecture is built for man. Although there are in the present some architecture offices that seem to be interested more in insects than in human beings. Like, for example, Terform in the United States, in New York. Anyway, I think architecture is going through some crisis now, because how could it continue to be read conceptually and literally, and at the same time to be green? I am seduced by many images of so-called green architecture, but not all of them, and some of them are just plainly demagogical about their so-called greenness. But I like this image. I like this, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. This is an incipient study, and I only show you the introduction to this theme. But, you know, it's also a return to some kind of a primeval architecture where we try to recuperate a past that belonged or we think it belonged to nature. But you know very well, there are many buildings today where the facades, the elevations are covered by green, meaning by plants. It's the return of nature. But as a friend of mine told me, who is a professor of environmental art in San Diego, at the University of San Diego, he said, then today is not possible any longer to talk about peace between man and nature. Either man wins or nature wins. A very pessimistic statement, and I'm not sure it's a valid one. I still hope that some kind of a negotiation is possible. But the truth of the matter is that man, meaning the human being, extended himself so much that, I mean, I know that 10% of the entire surface of the United States is covered by asphalt, is covered by concrete, is for parking lots. 10% of the entire surface of the United States, and the situation is almost everywhere in the world now. So if we continue to be, you know, almost diabolically obsessed with driving, because we continuously try to find solutions, so to speak, to pollution. So we invented the electrical car, but the electrical car pollutes itself, because the electricity pollutes, the battery that it uses pollutes, so the parking that it needs pollutes, the roads that it needs pollutes. So unless the human being renounces to many of its great pleasures, I don't think we will diminish the damage that we did to the earth and to nature. Otherwise, you know, I mean, the very idea to bring plants into the Cartesian structure is an intriguing one, you know, because it shows that architects, at least some architects, try to recuperate something that was lost. And it's not just the green per se of the leaves of the plants, but it's also the informal geometry, if I am to use the word geometry. Because in this picture, we see the structure of the house, you know, the Cartesian structure, but we also see the so-called disorder of nature. And the two are in conflict. Can we marry them? I think it's a legitimate question. There are already architects who try to bring to architecture some of that, let's call it disorder of nature, although nature is not disordered, but it's a different kind of order. Nature is organized, but not with our system of organization, which is mainly, you know, Cartesian. That the scientists talk about nature in terms of a spontaneous order. I remember Lucian Blaga making a distinction between the Saxon village and the Romanian village. He said the Saxon village is ordered and the Romanian village is disordered. But he said what we call disorder is actually a different kind of order. So in the same way, we could say that what appears to be disordered in nature is actually a different kind of order, a more subtle, a more complex type of order. So maybe this attempt to unite plant and man is a positive one, but how can we do it? You know, it's still a question, but I do think it's important, very, very important, to try to recuperate nature as much as possible, even if this means that we renounce to some of our paradigms and some of our obsessions with excessive comfort. I mean, you know, Su Fujimoto, for example, talks about primitive futures. Well, in a way, what we look at here is some kind of a primitive future. And there are other architects who explore this theme. It's also connected with what we call a post-Anthropocene life. So, post-man. Man, if the human being still wants to live on the earth, it must redefine himself, herself, themselves, itself. The human society, it has to redefine itself. Now here, I found searching for all kinds of materials, this title on a website. It's alive. Architects are using living plants as structural building components. There are experiments in this sense where living plants become the structure of the building. I don't know if I have here examples for this, but as I was intrigued by this very wording. It's alive, meaning the building is alive because architects are using living plants as structural building components. And here there is a website where you can study yourselves the relationship between architecture and plants or horticulture in today's world. I think it's an interesting, not only interesting aesthetically, but also a vital issue for today. It's not enough to just build our buildings as we always did and then hang some plants on the facade. That's simply not sufficient. There are all kinds of projects that try to unite the world of plants with the world of architecture. Like in this project, I personally welcome the complexity of nature into the Cartesian structure of the human work. Hello, 1st of May. Today is the day of the workers, the day of work. But it's also the day when, that sweet Carl Linnaeus proposed that we finally name the plants. Maybe we should go back to a world, but I don't know if this is correct. Maybe it's not correct to go back to a world before the plants were named. Is it possible? But one thing is for sure, plants are beautiful. Leaves are beautiful. Flowers are beautiful. The grass is beautiful. The trees are beautiful. We need them badly. How can we negotiate between architecture and them? Maybe we could start building after we first do the garden. Usually we did a building, and then if we still had the time and interest and some money, we created a garden around the house. But what if we start differently? What if we start doing the garden first and then the building, if we are pressed indeed to build the building? To start with the garden, not with the house. And then maybe find a way to build the house in such a way that will be in some kind of a less disturbing relationship with the garden that we just made. There are all kinds of attempts. Some of them are dramatic, like here. Nature is still incarcerated here, but the structure itself has a certain drama that makes you think that it's organic, it's nature-like, and so on. But look at the building on the left, look at the buildings in the background, and look at this polyp, sculptural and also almost exasperated. you know, this kind of vegetal monster that is trying to escape actually the world of man. The world of man that is Cartesian, that is strict, that is rational, that is, you know, too assertive, I would say. And that world we need to problematize, and the way to do it, I will show in the second presentation. Right now, I just chose in a hurry some images that show an attempt to, you know, maybe we could say to naturalize architecture. Heatherwick Studio, you know, Thomas Heatherwick, an important architect today, he designed in his studio this cancer center using the motif of potted plants. And apparently he received they received the approvals, and the building will start. So Heatherwick Studio, based out of London, is yet another practice that has turned to pottery for architectural inspiration, and have designed a building that speaks to the practical and emotional care Maggie's provides. Maggie's that's the cancer center. In contrast to the hospital, Maggie's needed to be a place that feels relaxed, informal, and domestic. The designers state plants seem to be a good fit. So you know, it's a different architecture because its priorities are different. At the same time as being a quiet domestic space for its users, on the inside there was an opportunity for the building's exterior to offer something positive and hopeful to people passing by. Surrounded by the huge and complex medical machine for healing, we wanted, that's what the architects say, we wanted to capture the positive and therapeutic experience of plants and see if it could be possible to make a whole building out of a garden. Interesting, just as an idea, to make the whole building out of a garden. We wondered if we could make a building from containers, each holding a piece of garden. The design formed itself as a collection of garden pots, defining a building by enclosing a series of spaces between them. The individual pots and planting are of different proportions, bringing the planting into and over the building itself. The most private spaces are created within the containers themselves. Between them are only the minimum flat sheets of glass necessary to weather, protect, and enclose the internal spaces. Now, for Thomas Heatherwick, this is not you know, a new attempt. He did it in other works, but this is one of his latest projects where he tries to animate the buildings with nature in this way, and it becomes almost like a rural fragment within an urban context. You see, even the way the landscape is done is done informally. Nature is allowed to manifest itself as freely as possible. And I think, you know, conceptually, if not in some other way, it is the correct approach to our desperate need for bringing back nature. There are other architects and important architects today who work in the same way, trying, as I said, almost desperately to recuperate what was lost. The interior is the interior, you know, the human being has needs, certain specific needs, is civilized, is clean, is comfortable, but you see through the glass the return of nature. And nature is climbing on the buildings and emerging from the buildings like plants from a pot, and it's all over the place. Architecture from living trees. Again, this is just a sketch of a possible more developed presentation, but I show some images that could provoke us to think differently, to understand that indeed is immensely important. In fact, it's vital if we are to diminish the effects of centuries of abuse that human beings, indulge themselves in relation with the earth. So much so that the climate is changing and pollution is high, and so on. All kinds of, so, these are some sketches of possible mediations or negotiations between man and nature. And, I mean, we look at this and we wonder, like with that kid there, what is this? This kind of, is it an architecture? It's not quite, or partially yes. It's organic, literally, not in the sense that, for example, Frank Lloyd Wright used the word organic. This is literally a return to nature. It is almost as if nature wants to become architecture. And it's in the process of accommodating itself to this thought. I don't know. I mean, there are all kinds of projects that try to sometimes to just mimic in a decorative way, some kind of a flower arrangement, structural or otherwise. But one thing is for sure, nature is having an exasperated return. And we have to facilitate this return if we are to survive on this earth. I mean, this flowering on top of concrete structures or wooden structures is an expression of this need to accommodate again in our life nature after we banished her. Now, is this a primitive future? I don't know. There is an architect in Italy, Andrea Branzi, whom I met in Orléans some years ago, and he advocates some kind of a desintoxication of nature. That is, for example, if you search for him, Andrea Branzi, Branzi, on Google Images, you'll see images of his projects where he's, showing a cow or several cows, and then laptops, people with laptops. So it's some kind of a, a return to nature and to the world of the, I mean, when I say nature, it's not just the plants, but also the world of the animals. And then on the other hand, having, the fruits, the products of the highest technology, some kind of a melange, some kind of a mixing together. But it's not easy to do this. Here again, we see, some kind of a pavilion that it's done almost by, in accordance, not in accordance, cooperating with nature. And gun is concrete, gun is steel and glass, and we see something else. We see, yes, the reassertion of the earth and of nature.